Good day. Here is our 6th video on word sums for grade 9 and 10. The 5th video and this one, the number 6th one, is about speed, distance and time. Please remember, if we don't know a value, we call it X or a small letter of the alphabet. I also assume that you understand that this is a triangle that we use for distance, speed and time. This is distance, this is speed and time. It says that if you go speed times time, you'll get distance. Distance divided by speed will give you time, and distance divided by time will give you speed. The first question we're going to do is a boy hikes 41 kilometers, and for the first part of the hike, he walks 4 kilometers an hour. For the rest of the hike, he walks at 5 kilometers an hour. If it takes him 9 hours to complete the hike, calculate how far he walked at each speed. Now, when we do problems with speed, time and distance, that is what I would write at the top in my table. 3 things. Usually there's just 2 things, but in these kind of sums we have 3. So we have speed, time and distance. I said in the previous video, you can put the distance in front or at the back, but I need these 2 next to each other and the distance on the side. In this story, the boy hiked for 41 kilometers, but there was 2 parts to it. The first part at 4 kilometers an hour, and the last part, he walked at 5 kilometers an hour. So we have 2 speeds here. We usually set up a table with these 2 pieces of information. We had the first part of his hike, and then he had the rest of his hike. We know the speed of the first part and the speed of the rest of the hike. This is usually not so difficult to understand. What I did say is that we write the kilometers per hour and then we take them out because we don't want too many variables in here. The next thing we know is that they told us that the total distance was 41 kilometers. A part of it he did at 4 kilometers an hour and another part he did at 5 kilometers an hour. We don't know any one of these 2 parts, so we can call one of the parts X. You can choose any one of the 2 as X, but I'm going to take the top one as X. And then the total was 41. So what is left now is 41 minus X kilometers is what is left for this second part of the hike. Now back to this important triangle that we use in distance, speed and time. Now to find out what the time is that he walked the first part and the time he walked the second part, we will go distance divide by speed. We have the distance, I know it doesn't look like it, and we have the speed that we can see. So the distance divided by speed will give us the time, and we'll write it in here. So here it will be the distance divided by the speed, which is x over 4 hours, and here will be the distance divided by the speed, which is 41 minus x over 5 hours. I also wrote in the 9 hours over here because that's the total time. We have the total distance. Not very important. This writing is optional to anybody as you want. Now what is important is that we've written all this information algebraically into a table. And we're now going to set up an equation to solve this problem. What they told us that if it takes him 9 hours to complete the hike, that means this time plus this time is going to give me 9 hours. And there's my equation popping out of the table. So this time plus this time is going to equal the total time that he used. So what we're going to do now is we're going to set up an equation to solve for x. Like I said, this time plus this time equals the total time. So we write the total time equals the time of the first part plus the time of the second part. Then we fill in. The total was the 9 hours they mentioned to us, the x over 4 that we wrote over there, and the 40 minus x over 5 that we wrote over there. So we have an equation now. The total time is the 2 wear times added together. From here, it is a normal equation that you must just times by the LCD and solve for x. You times by 20 to each term. You simplify it. Then you get your final answer, x equals to 16. So now let's go back and see what is this x that we chose. We took the distance as x over here, so that is the answer we now got. You must always go back to your table and see where you wrote the x. And this it was the first part of the hike's distance was x, so that was 16 over there. I just quickly run through the equation again. You see the total time is equal to the time of the first part plus the time of the rest. Wrote in the total time, took out the hours, wrote the x over 4. I've got an equation with fractions. I times by the LCD, and I solve for x. Then I go back and I say, who did I choose x to be? And that would be the first part's distance was x. So that is the 16 I just worked out. Then as I wrote over here, this is going to be 16 kilometers, and this will be 41 minus 16 kilometers for the rest of the hike. And please finally remember, we said that if you're doing a word sum, because it's full of words, you must be able to answer them at the end with words. So we got the 16 is x. He walked at 4 kilometers an hour for x kilometers, which is 16 kilometers, and he walked for 5 kilometers an hour for 41 minus x kilometers, which is 25 kilometers. You could just have written, he walked at 4 kilometers an hour for 16 kilometers, and he walked for 5 kilometers an hour for 25 kilometers. Just also remember, while you are doing these sums, when doing these kind of sums on speed, distance, and time, make sure that all your units are in kilometers and hours, and then you just use your calculator to work from there. Like I said in the beginning, this is not for the faint of heart. If this doesn't make sense, just leave that. Word sums are a very small section of maths, but if you look at this video a few times, and as you get older from year to year, it might get easier. Enjoy word sums.